The GSS Horizon was not a beautiful ship. It was old, small, and covered in patches where repairs had been made over many years. The paint was faded. The engines made strange sounds, but Captain Park loved her ship like a mother loves a difficult child. She sat in her captain's chair and watched the stars pass by on the main screen. The neutral corridor stretched before them, a region of space where no single species had power. It was a place between empires, a road that belonged to everyone and no one. 3 more days to the colony, said Navigator from his station. He was young, only 24 years old, but his hands moved across the controls like he had been flying ships his whole life. Smooth journey so far. Nodded, they were carrying medical supplies to a small human colony on the edge of known space. It was simple work, boring work, but honest work. In the galaxy, humans were considered a minor species. They had only been part of the galactic community for 60 years. Other species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They looked at humans the way adults look at small children trying to join a game. Humans were too weak, they said, too short-lived. A human might live 80 or 90 years if they were lucky. Some species lived for 500, others lived for 1,000. What could a species that died so quickly ever hope to accomplish? Had heard these things her whole life. She had learned to ignore them. "Captain," said Lieutenant from the engineering station. He was a thin man with tired eyes and hands that were always dirty from working on machines. "I'm picking up something strange." "Define strange," said. "A signal, very weak, very old frequency," frowned at his screen. "It's an SOS, emergency distress call, but the frequency is ancient. Only species in extreme trouble would use it." Stood up from her chair. "Can you find where it's coming from?" "Already working on it." His fingers danced across the controls. "Got it. About 4 hours from here if we change course." Communications officer Lee Myra turned from her station. She was a quiet woman who spoke 7 galactic languages and understood 12 more. "The signal is not human," she said. "The pattern matches standard emergency code." They were one of the 4 major powers in this region of space. They were tall beings with silver skin and eyes that saw more colors than humans could imagine. They considered themselves very civilized. They had voted against giving humans a seat on the Galactic Security Council just last year. "It's not our problem," said. "They have their own rescue ships, better ships than ours." "Maybe," said, "but they're not here, we are." Medic entered the bridge carrying a cup of coffee. She was a small woman with kind eyes and steady hands. She had served as a combat medic during the border conflicts before joining the Horizon crew. "What's happening?" "Distress call," said. 4 hours away, not human." Sipped her coffee. "Are we going?" This was the question. The smart answer was no. They had cargo to deliver. The signal was not from their species. The neutral corridor was dangerous for small ships. 100 reasons said to keep flying and let someone else handle it. Looked at her crew, 12 people. A small, old cargo ship. They had no weapons worth mentioning. Their medical supplies were meant for a human colony, not alien physiology. "Change course," said. "We're going to take a look." Nobody argued. This was why they served under Captain Park. She made decisions not based on what was smart, but on what was right. 4 hours later, they found the Eternal Grace. The luxury liner was enormous. It was longer than 20 horizons placed end to end. Its hull was decorated with gold and silver patterns. It had been designed to carry the wealthy and powerful across the galaxy in comfort and style. Now it was dark, the beautiful lights were off, the great engines were silent, the ship drifted like a dead thing in the void. "Life signs?" asked. Studied his readings. Over 3,000, but they're weak. Something is wrong with their life support. Oxygen levels are dropping. "How long do they have?" "Maybe 4 hours, maybe less." Myra was listening to all the communications frequencies. I'm picking up internal messages. There are passengers from 4 different species on board. Oran, Sorrel, and many of them are important people. Ambassadors, military officers, religious leaders, even a prince. Whistled softly. That ship is carrying half the galaxy's VIPs. What happened to it? Gravitational anomaly, said, reading the data. The ship passed too close to an unstable gravity well. The engines were damaged. Life support is failing. Where are the rescue ships? Asked. With so many important people, they should have fleets coming. Myra shook her head. That's the problem. The 4 species on board are in political conflict with each other right now. None of them will send military ships into the neutral corridor, while the others might do the same. They're all waiting for someone else to move first. So they're going to let 3,000 people die because of politics, sounded disgusted. That's exactly what's going to happen, said quietly, unless we do something. The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. 12 humans, 1 small ship, 3,000 aliens from species that looked down on humanity. The mathematics did not make sense. The idea was crazy. Captain said carefully, I want to help. We all do, but we don't have the resources. We don't have the equipment. We don't even have medical supplies that work on their biology. I know, said. So what do we do? Looked at the dying ship on her screen. Somewhere inside, 3,000 people were slowly running out of air. They were scared. They were waiting for help that was not coming. They probably thought they were going to die. We do what humans do, said. We try anyway. Open a communication channel to the Eternal Grace. Myra opened the channel. Eternal Grace, this is Captain Park of the GSS Horizon. We received your distress call. We are a small ship with a small crew, but we are here. We are coming to help you. Hold on. The response came back after a long moment. The voice was old and tired and filled with something that might have been either hope or despair. Horizon, this is Ambassador of the Collective. We thank you for your courage, but you should know that we have over 3,000 passengers and only 4 hours of air remaining. Your ship is small. Your species is. Forgive me, but your species is not known for this kind of work. What can you possibly do? Smiled, though no one could see it. Ambassador, we can do more than you think. Prepare to receive my boarding team. We're going to get every single person on that ship home alive. She closed the channel and looked at her crew. Suit up, she said. We have work to do. On the Eternal Grace, Ambassador turned to his aide. He was very old, even by standards. He had seen many things in his long life, but he had never seen anything quite like this. A human cargo ship, he said softly. 12 humans are coming to save 3,000 of us. The same species we voted to exclude from the Security Council last cycle. His aide said nothing. There was nothing to say. Either we are about to witness something remarkable, continued, or we are about to die. I wonder which it will be. Outside the window, the small, battered shape of the GSS Horizon moved closer. It looked tiny against the vastness of space. It looked like nothing at all. But inside that tiny ship, 12 humans were preparing to attempt the impossible. And they were not afraid. The airlock of the Eternal Grace opened with a hiss of stale air. Captain Park stepped through first, followed by Medic and 2 other crew members. The smell hit them immediately. Fear and sweat and the sharp chemical odor of failing life support systems. The main corridor was chaos. Hundreds of aliens filled the space, separated into groups by species. The had claimed one section. The Oran had taken another. The Sorrel and were packed into whatever spaces remained. Nobody was working together. Nobody was sharing resources. Each group protected what little they had and looked at the others with suspicion. A tall figure pushed through the crowd. He wore a military uniform covered in medals and ribbons. His skin was dark blue, his eyes were yellow, and his face showed nothing but contempt. I am Commander Talais of the Oran Empire, he announced. "You are the human rescue team." "Yes," said simply. Tail Eyes looked at her, then he looked at the two crew members behind them. He began to laugh. "4 humans," he said. "You send 4 humans to save 3,000 of us. Is this a joke? Are there more coming?" "There are 12 of us total," said. 8 more on our ship." 12? Tail Eyes laughed harder. His laugh was cruel and mocking. 12 humans. Your mathematics are as weak as your bodies. Go home, little creatures. Go home and let the real powers of the galaxy handle this. Did not react to his insult. "Commander, with respect, the real powers of the galaxy are not here. They are arguing about politics while you run out of air. We are here. We are going to help. You can either work with us or stay out of our way." Tail Eyes stopped laughing. His yellow eyes became cold. "You dare speak to me like this?" "I dare to speak the truth. Now, if you will excuse me, I have 3,000 lives to save." She walked past him without waiting for permission, followed, hiding a small smile. The commander stood frozen, too shocked to respond. Nobody had ever dismissed him so casually before. Ambassador met them in what had been a beautiful dining hall. Now it was a makeshift gathering place for the sick and injured. The old diplomat looked tired and scared, but he bowed politely as the humans approached. "Captain, thank you for coming. I must be honest with you. Many here do not believe you can help us. Many think you are wasting your time and hours." "I understand," said, "but we're going to help anyway. What is your situation?" Explained. The gravitational anomaly had damaged the main engines beyond repair. Without power from the engines, the backup systems were failing one by one. Life support was running on emergency reserves. They had perhaps 3.5 hours of breathable air remaining. "We have engineers from every species on board," said. "They all say the same thing. The damage cannot be fixed in time. We have sent messages to our governments. They send condolences but no ships." "Show me your engineering section," said. An hour later, lieutenant and navigator had crawled through half the service tunnels on the Eternal Grace. Both were covered in grease and dust. Both were studying systems they had never seen before. "This doesn't make sense," said, pointing at a panel. "Their backup atmospheric processors are undamaged. Why aren't they working?" "Examine the controls." His eyebrows rose slowly. "Because they're locked. The safety protocols won't let them run without authorization from the command crew." "So get authorization." "That's the problem. The authorization requires codes from the captain and 3 senior officers. The captain died in the initial accident. 1 officer is in a coma. 2 others are sorrel, and the crew won't let them access central systems because of political reasons." Stared at him. "They're going to let everyone die because of passwords." "Apparently so." Was quiet for a moment. Then he began to work on the control panel. "What are you doing?" asked. "Bypassing the safety protocols." "Can you do that?" Smiled slightly. It was the smile of a man who had spent his youth doing things he probably shouldn't have. "I grew up on a colony ship where half the systems were broken. I learned to fix things without permission a long time ago." His fingers moved across the alien controls. He muttered to himself in Korean, occasional curse words mixing with technical terms. Watched the systems with growing amazement. "The alien engineers said this would take 12 hours minimum," said. "The alien engineers were following proper procedures," replied. "I'm not." 38 minutes later, the backup atmospheric processors hummed to life. Fresh air began flowing through the ship. The clock that had been counting down to death stopped. Captain received the news on her communicator. She was in the main corridor, trying to organize the chaos. "Good work," she said. "That gives us more time. Now we need to deal with everything else." She looked around at the frightened masses of aliens. Different species, different needs, different atmospheric requirements, different medical conditions. It was a puzzle with 1,000 pieces, and most of them didn't fit together. "Listen to me," she said loudly. Her voice carried through the corridor. "I am Captain Park. My crew and I are here to help all of you. Not just the Oran, all of you." Commander Taileyes pushed forward again. "You cannot give orders here, human. You have no authority." "You're right," said. "I have no authority, but I have a plan. Would you like to hear it, or would you prefer to stand there and complain while people die?" Taileyes' face twisted with anger, but before he could respond, Ambassador spoke. "Let her speak, Commander. She has already done more in 1 hour than all our governments have done in 3. Nodded gratefully to the old diplomat. "Here is what we're going to do. The atmospheric processors are working, but they're not designed to handle this many people. We need to spread everyone out evenly across the ship." "Impossible," said a sorrel priest named. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 arms. "Our species require different air mixtures. We cannot simply mix together." "I know," said. "That's why we're going to create zones. Section A for species that breathe standard oxygen. Section B for species that need nitrogen-heavy mixtures. Section C for those with special requirements. We move people based on their needs, not their flags." "You want to mix our people together?" Taileyes demanded. "Oran citizens sharing space with." "Yes, that's exactly what I want." Never stepped closer to him. She was much shorter than the commander. She had to look up to meet his eyes, but somehow in that moment she did not seem small at all. "Commander Taileyes, you can argue about politics. You can hate each other. You can fight wars when this is over. But right now you can either breathe together or die separately. Those are your only choices. Which do you prefer?" Taileyes stared at her. The corridor was silent. 3,000 lives hung on his answer. Slowly, very slowly, he stepped back. "Do what you must," he said quietly, "for now." Did not celebrate the small victory. There was too much work to do. Over the next 2 hours, the 12 humans of the GSS Horizon worked without rest. They moved passengers. They fixed systems. They treated injuries. They solved problems that nobody else would touch. Communications officer Lee Myra was helping a group of children when one of their oxygen masks failed. Without thinking, she pulled off her own mask and gave it to the child. Then she held her breath and kept working. Her face turned red. Her lungs burned. She moved another child to safety. Then another. Only when she reached a new supply of masks did she allow herself to breathe. A young sorrel prince named watched from across the corridor. He had been raised to believe that humans were weak, fragile, inferior. He watched this small human woman give away her own air for a child of a species that was not her own. He watched her suffer rather than let anyone else suffer. He began to understand that he had been wrong about many things. In the medical bay, worked on patients with biology she had never studied in school. She asked questions. She made calculations. She adapted. When an Oran elder's hearts began to fail, she had no equipment designed for Oran physiology. She had only human medicines and human tools. But she also had knowledge she had gathered for years, learning about alien species because she found them interesting. "You're guessing," Elder Priest accused, watching her prepare an injection. "No," said calmly, "I'm adapting." She administered the injection. For a long moment nothing happened. Then the elder's heart stabilized. Color returned to his blue skin. He opened his eyes. Stared at the human medic with something close to wonder. "How?" he asked. Smiled tiredly. "Humans are good at adapting. It's what we do." In the engineering section was transferring fuel cells from the horizon to the Eternal Grace. Each cell he transferred was one they could not get back. Without fuel, their own ship would be stranded. Captain came to check on him. "You know what this means," she said. "Once we're done, we can't leave. We'll be stuck here too." "I know," said. He didn't stop working. "That's why we answered the signal, isn't it? Not to do what was easy, to do what was right. Watched him for a moment, then she placed her hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud to serve with you," she said. "Same to you, Captain." Somewhere in the ship, a child was breathing because a human had given her mask. An Oran elder was alive because a human had refused to give up. Thousands of people had more time because humans had found a way. And this was only the beginning. 6 hours had passed since the horizon had answered the distress call. 6 hours of constant work, constant problems, constant crisis. The 12 humans had not rested. They could not rest. There was too much to do. Medic stood in the center of the makeshift medical bay. Around her, patients lay on tables that had once held expensive food at fancy dinners. Oran, sorrel, 12 different species with 12 different needs. Her human medical supplies were nearly gone. But she kept working. A sorrel delegate was brought in. He was an important priest, a friend of Elder. 3 hearts beat in his chest and all 3 were failing. His gray skin had turned pale. His breathing was shallow. "He needs specialized equipment," one of the sorrel aides said frantically. "Equipment that was damaged in the accident. There is nothing you can do." Looked at the dying priest. She looked at her remaining supplies. She thought about everything she had learned about alien biology over the years. Her colleagues had laughed at her obsession with xenobiology. They had called it a useless hobby. It was not useless now. "Hold him down," she said. "This might not be comfortable." She combined 3 different human medications in a way that no official protocol would ever allow. She calculated dosages based on body weight, species differences, and educated guesses. She prepared an injection that had never been tried before. Elder grabbed her arm. His 4 hands were strong. His eyes were filled with fear and anger. "You are guessing," he said. "You will kill him." Met his eyes calmly. "Maybe, or maybe I will save him. Those are the only choices we have. Do you want me to try, or do you want me to let him die?" His grip slowly loosened. He stepped back. Administered the injection. For 30 terrible seconds, nothing happened. The priest's hearts continued to fail. His breathing grew weaker. Everyone in the room watched. Some began to whisper prayers. Then the first heart stabilized, then the second, then the third. Color returned to the priest's face. His breathing deepened. His eyes opened slowly. What happened?" he asked weakly. "You lived," said simply. She was already moving to the next patient. Elder stood frozen. He had served his God for 200 years. He had seen what he believed were miracles, but he had never seen anything like this small human woman who refused to let death win. In another part of the ship, Navigator was facing his own crisis. Section 7 had suffered a structural failure. The walls had buckled. The doors had sealed automatically to prevent further damage, but inside that sealed section, 40 passengers were trapped. Ambassador was among them. So were children from 5 different species. They had 20 minutes of air remaining. "We need cutting tools," Commander Taileyes demanded. "We need to breach the doors." "The doors are reinforced," Lieutenant said, studying the schematics. "By the time we cut through, they'll be dead." "Then what do you suggest, human?" Was looking at the maintenance shafts that ran through the ship. They connected every section. They were designed for small repair robots, not people, but they were wide enough for a human. Barely. "I can go through the shafts," said. "There's an emergency release inside Section 7. If I can reach it, I can open the doors from the inside." "Those shafts are flooded with coolant," said. "Coolant that is toxic to most species." "But not immediately fatal to humans," replied. "It will hurt. It will damage my skin, but I can survive long enough." Taileyes laughed. It was not a mocking laugh this time. It was the laugh of someone who could not believe what he was hearing. "You would crawl through poison to save people who are not your species." "That's the job," said. He was already removing his outer jacket. "Tell them to hold on, I'm coming." He entered the shaft. The coolant was cold at first. Then it began to burn. Felt it eating at his skin, seeping through his clothes, stinging his eyes. Every instinct told him to turn back. Every nerve in his body screamed with pain. He kept crawling. Behind him, on the other side of the sealed doors, Lieutenant counted the time. 18 minutes, 15, 12. Inside Section 7, Ambassador held a child in his arms. The child was crying. The air was thin. Several passengers had already fainted. "Help is coming," said. He did not know if he believed it, but he said it anyway. 10 minutes. Could barely see. The coolant had nearly blinded him. His skin was covered in chemical burns. His lungs struggled with each breath, but he could see the emergency release ahead, just a few more meters. He reached out. His burned fingers found the lever. He pulled. The doors opened. Fresh air rushed into Section 7. Passengers gasped and cried and laughed with relief. Emergency teams rushed in to help the injured and unconscious. Crawled out of the shaft. He could barely stand. He was vomiting from the toxins in his system. His skin was red and blistering. But he was alive, and so were 40 people who should have died. Commander Talais was waiting for him. The Oran officer looked at the young human, covered in burns, shaking with pain and exhaustion. "You need medical attention," Talais said. His voice was different now. The mockery was gone. Later said he was already looking around. "Are there other sections in trouble?" "You cannot be serious." "Are there other sections in trouble?" Talais stared at him for a long moment. Then he pointed down the corridor. "Section 12 has power fluctuations. The life support is unstable." Nodded and started walking toward Section 12. He stumbled. He caught himself on the wall. He kept walking. Talais watched him go. The commander had fought in wars. He had seen bravery before, but he had never seen anything like this. "What are these creatures?" he whispered to himself. In the hours that followed, the pattern repeated again and again. Problems arose. Calculations said the problems could not be solved. Humans solved them anyway. Lieutenant worked beside an Oran engineer to stabilize a failing power relay. His hands were bleeding from a cut he had not had time to bandage. The Oran pointed it out. Looked at his hand as if noticing it for the first time. "It's just pain," he said. "Pain goes away." He went back to work. Communications officer Lee Myra translated between species who had refused to speak to each other for decades. When the leaders argued, she did not take sides. She simply repeated what each one said until they understood each other. She had been awake for 10 hours. She showed no sign of stopping. Captain Park was everywhere. She organized. She decided. She solved disputes. She encouraged the frightened. She pushed back against the powerful. She made the impossible seem possible. At one point, a young Sorrel servant asked her why humans worked so hard. Thought about the question. She was exhausted. Her whole body ached. She had not eaten in hours, but she smiled. "Because someone has to," she said, "and we're here." Late in the long night, Elder Priest found Medic sitting in a corner of the medical bay. She had finally allowed herself to rest, just for a moment. Her eyes were closed. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion. Approached her silently. In his faith, there was a blessing reserved for special people, people who carried the weight of others' lives on their shoulders. It had never been given to anyone outside his species. It was sacred. He placed his 4 hands over her head and spoke the ancient words. Opened her eyes. She did not understand the language, but she understood the gesture. "Thank you," she said softly. "No," replied. "Thank you. I was wrong about your kind. We were all wrong." Across the ship, Prince of the Sorrel Dominion sat by a window. He was young, only 40 years old by his species count. He had been raised in palaces and courts. He had been taught that power came from wealth and weapons and ancient bloodlines. He had watched the humans for hours now. He had watched them suffer. He had watched them sacrifice. He had watched them refuse to give up. His tutors had taught him that humans were weak, short-lived creatures with fragile bodies and limited minds, a minor species, unimportant. His tutors had been fools. He understood now that strength was not about muscles or technology. Strength was about what you did when everything seemed impossible. Strength was about choosing to help when you could have walked away. These 12 humans had more strength than all the armies of his empire. He made a decision in that moment. When this was over, when he returned to his people, he would tell them what he had learned. He would tell them about the humans. He would tell them the truth. Outside the window, the stars watched silently as the long night continued. Inside the ship, 12 humans kept working, kept fighting, kept refusing to let anyone die. And one by one, the aliens who had looked down on them began to understand that they had been measuring strength in all the wrong ways. 12 hours had passed since the rescue began. The passengers of the Eternal Grace were stable. The immediate crises had been handled. For the first time since answering the distress call, Captain Park allowed herself to think they might actually succeed. Then Lieutenant called her to the navigation center. "We have a problem," he said. His face was pale, his voice was quiet. "The ship is drifting. The gravitational anomaly that damaged us is pulling us back toward it." Looked at the navigation screens. The numbers were clear. The Eternal Grace was moving slowly but steadily toward the same force that had nearly destroyed it. "Can we change course?" "Yes, but the main navigation thrusters are damaged. They can only be adjusted manually, from outside the ship." "How long would it take?" 8 minutes minimum. The work requires precise adjustments to 3 separate thruster ports. "And the radiation levels outside?" Did not answer immediately. He pulled up the readings. The area around the thrusters was flooded with radiation from the damaged engines, levels that would kill most species in minutes. "Fatal exposure for Iran and at 3 minutes," he said. "Fatal for Sorrel at 4 minutes, fatal for humans at," he paused, 15 to 20 minutes. Understood. The alien species could not survive long enough to complete the work. Humans could, but survival did not mean unharmed. The radiation would cause severe damage, permanent damage, the kind of damage that shortened already short human lives. "I'll do it," she said. "No," Captain shook his head. "You're needed here, the ship needs you, I'll go." Before could respond, 3 more humans entered the navigation center. Communications Officer Lee Myra, navigator, still covered in burns from his earlier heroics, and 2 engineers from the Horizon crew. "We heard," Myra said. "We're going too." "You can't," said. "The radiation will." "We know what it will do," interrupted. His voice was calm. His burned face showed no fear. "That's why we're going, because we can survive long enough and they can't." Prince had been standing in the doorway listening. He stepped forward now. His tall, sorrel frame towered over the humans. "Wait," he said. "You cannot do this. You will die, or you will suffer for the rest of your already short lives. Why would you choose this?" Looked at the young prince. She saw genuine confusion in his eyes. He truly did not understand. "Because no one else can," she said simply, "and someone has to." "But why you? Why do humans always choose to sacrifice?" Thought about the question. She thought about her species, about their short lives and their small bodies and their place at the bottom of the galactic order. She thought about all the times other species had looked down on them. "Maybe because we understand something that longer-lived species forget," she said. "We know that we're going to die, all of us, sooner than we want to, so we don't waste time asking if it's worth it. We just ask if it's right." Had no response to this. The 4 volunteers suited up in the airlock, checked each suit carefully. Myra tested the communications equipment, whose burns made every movement painful, did not complain once. Ambassador arrived, moving slowly because of his age. He had heard what was happening. "I must protest," he said. "This is too much. You have done enough, more than enough. You cannot ask this of your people." "I'm not asking them," said. "They volunteered." "Then I will order them to stop. I have authority here. I represent." "With respect, Ambassador," said from inside the airlock, "you can order us to stop, but we won't listen. We're humans. We don't always follow orders that seem stupid." Stared at him. Then slowly the old diplomat began to laugh. It was a sad laugh, full of wonder and something that might have been shame. "We voted against you," he said. "The collective. We voted to keep you off the Security Council because we thought you were inferior. We were fools." "Maybe," said, "but you can fix that later. Right now we have work to do." The airlock opened. The 4 humans stepped out into space. Inside the ship, everyone who could reach watched. Commander Talai stood with his officers. Elder Priest stood with his followers. Prince stood alone, his eyes fixed on the small figures moving through the deadly radiation. The humans worked slowly but steadily. Each movement was careful. Each adjustment was precise. They knew they had limited time, but they did not rush. Rushing would mean mistakes. Mistakes would mean everyone's death. After 3 minutes, the radiation began to affect them. Their movement slowed. Their vital signs, displayed on screens inside the ship, began to show stress. After 5 minutes, Lee Myra stumbled. She caught herself on the hull and kept working. After 7 minutes, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the tools. But he finished the adjustment on the first thruster port. After 9 minutes, collapsed. One of the other humans dragged him toward the second thruster port and kept working. Inside the ship, watched the vital signs with tears streaming down her face. She knew what was happening to their bodies. She knew the damage that was being done. "Come back," she whispered. "Please come back." After 12 minutes, the second thruster port was adjusted. 3 humans still moving, 1 unconscious. The radiation levels were rising. Commander Talai turned to one of his officers. "Are there suits that could protect us? Anything?" "No, Commander. The radiation is too severe. Even our best equipment would only add 2 or 3 minutes." "Then send soldiers anyway. Have them carry the humans back after the work is done." The officer hesitated. "Commander, that would be a suicide mission for our people." Talai stared at the 4 small figures dying to save 3,000 aliens who had mocked them. "I know," he said. "Prepare the team." But before the Iran soldiers could deploy, the work was finished. 14 minutes. 3 thruster ports adjusted. 1 more minute until the radiation would have killed them all. The surviving humans turned and began moving back toward the airlock. They carried between them, was barely conscious. Myra was crying inside her helmet, though no one could see. The airlock opened. They fell inside, the doors closed. Captain was waiting for them. She caught as he collapsed, rushed in with medical equipment already working before they hit the ground. The thrusters gasped, "Fire them now." Gave the order. The navigation thrusters fired. The Eternal Grace changed course, moving away from the gravitational anomaly, moving toward safety. In the medical bay worked on the 4 heroes. She could not undo the damage. She could only try to minimize it. The radiation had done what radiation does. It had hurt them in ways that would never fully heal. Would need months of treatment. Myra's eyesight might never fully recover. The 2 engineers would carry the damage in their cells for the rest of their lives, would lose years from his already short human. They had paid a terrible price. But 3,000 people were alive because of that price. Ambassador came to the medical bay. He stood in the doorway, watching the unconscious humans. He had lived for 400 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had known leaders and generals and kings. He had never seen anything like this. "Why do humans do this?" he asked Captain, who sat beside her injured crew. "Your lives are already so short. You have so little time. and yet you spend it, waste it, on strangers who have never shown you kindness. Looked at her people, at who had crawled through impossible systems, at Myra who had given her air to an alien child, at who had swum through poison, at all of them broken but alive. Maybe that's exactly why, she said. We know how precious time is. We know every moment matters. And we've decided that how we spend our moments is more important than how many we get. Was silent for a long time. I think, he said finally, that we have been measuring your species very wrongly. Maybe, said, but that's okay, we're used to it. She turned back to her crew. She held his hand. She watched the monitors that showed their damaged but living hearts still beating. They had paid the price. They had done the impossible. They had proved something that no words could ever prove. And they had done it not for glory or recognition or reward. They had done it because it was right. Outside the ship, the rescue fleets were finally approaching. Ships from all four major powers, forced by the crisis to work together for the first time in decades. When they boarded the Eternal Grace, they found something unprecedented. 3,000 survivors of different species, sitting together, sharing resources, helping each other, working as one. And at the center of it all, 12 exhausted humans being thanked in 17 different languages. The galaxy was about to learn something new about humanity. And nothing would ever be quite the same again. 3 months had passed since the rescue of the Eternal Grace. The 12 humans of the GSS Horizon had become famous across the galaxy, though none of them had wanted fame. They had simply wanted to help. Now they sat in the great Galactic Assembly Hall on the planet Centrum. It was the largest building any of them had ever seen. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into clouds. The seats held representatives from over 200 species, and every single one of those representatives was there to hear what had happened in the neutral corridor. Captain Park sat in the center of the human delegation. She was still recovering from her injuries. They all were. But when the assembly had requested their presence, refusing had not felt right. "This session will now begin," announced the speaker, a massive being with a voice like thunder. "The purpose of this gathering is to formally recognize the actions of the human vessel GSS Horizon and to hear testimony from those who witnessed the rescue." One by one, the survivors spoke. Commander Talais of the Oran Empire was first. The military officer who had mocked the humans now stood before the assembly with something like humility in his voice. "I was wrong," he said. The words seemed difficult for him. "When the humans arrived, I laughed at them. 12 weak creatures with a small ship. I told them to go home. I told them they could not help." He paused, gathering himself. "I watched a human woman give her own air supply to a child that was not her species. I watched a human man crawl through poison to save strangers. I watched humans work until they collapsed, then get up and keep working. I have commanded soldiers for 200 years. I have seen courage before, but I have never seen anything like what I saw on that ship." He turned to look at the humans directly. "I was wrong, and I am sorry." Elder Priest spoke next. His forearms were folded in the gesture his people used for sacred occasions. "In my faith, we have a blessing reserved for those who carry the sacred burden of others' lives. It has never been given to an outsider. I gave it to the human medic because she earned it. She saved lives that our calculations said could not be saved. She found ways when there were no ways." His voice dropped lower. "We teach our children that the divine speaks through actions, not words. On the Eternal Grace, I saw the divine working through human hands." Prince of the Sorrel Dominion was young by his species standards, but his words carried weight because of his family's power. "I was raised to believe that humans were inferior," he said. "Short lives, weak bodies, limited minds. I was taught that their species had nothing to offer the galactic community." He shook his head slowly. "I witnessed not weakness wearing a mask of strength, but strength that had never needed a mask. I saw humans suffer so that others could live. I saw them choose pain so that strangers could avoid it. I saw them give everything they had, expecting nothing in return. He looked at the assembly members. We were measuring them wrong. We looked at their bodies and saw weakness. We looked at their and saw limitations. But we never looked at their hearts. We never measured their will. We never calculated how much they could care about people they had never met. His voice rose. I am here to tell you that those are the only strengths that ever truly mattered. Ambassador spoke last. He was very old now, older than when the crisis had begun. The stress of those hours had aged him further, but his voice was strong. I have served the collective for 300 years, he said. I have voted on countless matters. One of those matters was whether humans should be granted a seat on the Security Council. I voted against them. I believed they were too young, too inexperienced, too unimportant to participate in galactic governance. He turned to face the humans. I was dying on that ship. We all were. Our great government sent us condolences instead of rescue. Our powerful allies offered sympathy instead of help. And then a small cargo ship appeared. 12 humans. They had no obligation to help us. They had every reason to continue on their journey, but they stopped. They came. They saved us. His voice cracked slightly. They gave us their fuel. They gave us their supplies. They gave us their health. Some of them gave us years of their already short lives, and they asked for nothing in return. The hall was completely silent. I have a question for this assembly, continued. It is the question a human captain asked me when I asked her why they sacrificed so much for strangers. She asked me, how do we spend our moments? How do we use the time we have? He looked around at the representatives of 200 species. These humans understood something that we have forgotten. They understood that it is not how long you live that matters. It is how you choose to live. It is not what you have that defines you. It is what you give. He drew himself up to his full height. I move that humanity be granted a permanent seat on the Galactic Security Council, immediately, without further debate. The speaker looked out at the assembly, all in favor. For the first time in 800 years, the vote was unanimous. Captain Park was asked to speak. She rose slowly. Her injuries still pained her. She was not comfortable with attention. She was just a cargo ship captain, just a human. But she spoke anyway. I don't have much to say, she began. We saw a distress signal. We answered it. That's what you do when someone needs help. The assembly was silent, waiting. You calculated what we could do based on our physical strength, our technology, our resources. You didn't calculate what we would do. You measured our bodies and found them weak. You measured our and found them short. But you never measured our will. She looked at Commander Talais, at Elder, at Prince, at Ambassador. You never measured how much we can care about people we've never met. You never measured how much we're willing to hurt for someone else's survival. Those aren't weaknesses. Those are the only strengths that ever really mattered. She sat back down. She had nothing else to say. The assembly voted on a second measure that day. They established something called the Horizon Protocol, a new standard for emergency response across the galaxy. The key statement of the protocol read, when calculating rescue parameters, human psychological factors must be weighted equally with physical capabilities. It was a complicated way of saying something simple. When the numbers say something is impossible, ask the humans. They never learned to read those numbers anyway. 6 months later, Communications Officer Lee Myra sat in a hospital bed. She was still recovering from the radiation exposure. Her eyesight was damaged. She would need treatment for the rest of her life. A nurse brought her a package. Inside was a drawing. It showed a small human figure surrounded by much larger alien shapes. All of them were reaching toward the human. All of them had words written above them in different languages. Myra could not read most of the languages, but she could read the note attached to the drawing. To the human who gave me her air, thank you, you are my family now, love. It was from the child whose oxygen mask had failed, the child Myra had saved by giving away her own air. Myra pinned the drawing above her bed. She looked at it for a long time. Across the galaxy, the story of the GSS Horizon spread. Ships began specifically requesting human crew members, not for their strength or their technology, but for their stubbornness, not for their logic, but for their hope. In training academies on 100 worlds, a new lesson was taught. When facing the impossible, call the humans. They don't know how to give up. Captain Park returned to her cargo ship. The Horizon had been repaired. Her crew had recovered mostly. They had new routes to fly, new cargo to carry. Life went on. But sometimes, late at night, when the stars were quiet and the ship was still, would sit in her captain's chair and remember. She would remember the fear in Ambassador's voice, the mocking laughter of Commander Taileyes that had turned to respect, the hands of Elder blessing a human medic, the young prince learning that he had been taught lies. She would remember her crew, bleeding and working, Myra breathless and helping, burning and crawling, all of them giving everything they had for strangers who had never shown them kindness. And she would smile, because that was what humans did. That was who they were, not the strongest, not the longest lived, not the most advanced. But maybe, just maybe, the most willing to try when trying seemed impossible, the most willing to care when caring cost everything, the most willing to help when help was needed. The galaxy had learned something new about humanity, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. Outside the window, the stars waited. The universe stretched on forever, and somewhere in all that vastness, 12 humans in a small ship continued their journey, ready to answer the next signal that called for help. Because that was the job. And they were very, very good at it.